Welcome back to the PMP Industry Insider Podcast. We take you to the front lines of what's driving change in the pest and lawn industry. I'm Brett, the editor. This is another edition of Insiders Rewind. We are officially a year old for this spin-off show. Thanks for tuning in each and every month. We're looking back to February this time around and focusing on good points made throughout the month. We featured guests like Laura Corbin from Pest Control Business Coach, attorney Mark Ruff, Brett Lieberman of My Pest Pros, and NPMA's own Andrew Architect and Megan Striegel. We'll get to all of that soon, but we need to make a stop and thank our sponsors. Since the very start of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, Coalmarch has been a sponsor of the show. If you're interested in digital marketing and are looking to grow your business, check out coalmarch.com. And for listeners of the show, you can visit coalmarch.com/podcast. You'll get information there about getting your first month free. For more than 40 years, PestSure has been protecting pest control companies with specialized insurance and safety programs. They understand the industry better than anyone else. Visit PestSure.com to learn more. Voice for Pest delivers phone solutions specifically designed for pest and lawn care. They have powerful AI features and deep integrations with most industry CRMs. Learn more at voiceforpest.com. And our newest sponsor is one of the leading distributors in the industry. Welcome, Forshaw. They're a family business that started back in 1961. Their inventory management system is called Foresight, and it's built to bring clarity, control inventory, and support smarter operations and decision-making. And if you're interested in joining one of our peer groups, there are options available. Industry vet David Billingsley facilitates the groups, and you can go back and listen to episode 238 to gain knowledge on how the peer groups work. They are continuing to grow, and we'd love to have you. Every Thursday, new episodes drop, and we had a great February. Lots of guests and topics ranging from growth in your business to practical AI tools, some rule breakers down in Florida, and Legislative Day coming up mid-March. And we're going to start with the growth conversation when we featured Laura Corbin. She's a team development coach for Pest Control Business Coach. And if you remember back to the final episode in January, we also featured Sherry Spencer Bachman from Pest Control Business Coach. So to keep that theme going, Laura Corbin was on for the Growth Without the Grind episode. Communication gaps is where we'll start.
Let's talk about sales teams and leadership. They often talk past each other. Sales blames it on operations. Operations blames it on sales. And, what are the most common communication gaps that you see, and how do you help the teams close them?
To me, the biggest communication gaps are unclear expectations, and there's no consistent accountability in place. Sales thinks they're doing great because they're busy, and leadership thinks they're underperforming because the numbers aren't matching the activity. And then both sides get frustrated, right? And then neither one's hearing the other, and they kind of just start working against each other instead of working with each other. So, to me, the biggest and most important things are you've got to define what does success look like. The best way to do that is through KPIs, in my opinion, measuring the numbers, and you inspect what you expect. If you don't know what you expect, how are you going to inspect it and make sure that they're doing a great job? So you've got to create very clear expectations and KPIs that, by the way, needs to be extremely transparent. You talked about our TVs in the office with these rolling numbers. That's why we had it. We wanted to make sure everybody knew what they were being measured up against and what they were being held to as far as the expectation goes. And then also keeping that communication open. We always had a weekly sales meeting where we celebrated that information, good or bad. It didn't matter. We talked about it, we celebrated it, and then we helped coach each other on how we can improve those things. So the more effective communication you can have, the more open, creating very clear and consistent expectations, and then just putting metrics in place, it's going to help so much in bridging the gap within that communication.
Laura Corbin from Pest Control Business Coach on the show. Growth Without the Grind, episode 260. We're going to move up to episode 261 now with attorney Mark Ruff. A big story dropped back in January when Florida ag officials shut down an illegal door-to-door operation. Large fines stemmed off of this, and the state banned the company from any pest control sales and activities. It was back in 2025, about a year ago from the time of this show here in March, but officials learned that a lot of unlicensed pest control activities were happening.
Why does the Department of Ag in Florida have jurisdiction over this process? How is it that that they're able to claim jurisdiction, because there's no pesticide being used at the door?
Okay, well, in Florida, the sale of pest control is considered pest control, which gives them regulatory authority to take action. And the way it's sold, one thing I think is important, and in New Jersey, I can't speak to New Jersey, but in Florida, stop and think about it for a moment. You have some door-to-door sales knocking on the door saying, Mrs. Gordon, we're going to sell you pest control. And Mrs. Gordon says, well, I got this kind of bug over here and I don't understand. No, here's our contract. This individual is selling pest control with no knowledge of either of the treatment or the organism they're trying to treat. So it's just a blanket sale. Some of these contracts just have pictures on them. Here's the bugs that we treat. But Mrs. Gordon doesn't know. She could have bed bugs, could have an infestation of bed bugs. Not on here, but she can't tell the difference. So there's a difference if the consumer asks the pest control company, I've got this problem, what can you do to fix it? And then what's an untrained person going to say? Yeah, it covers. You end up in a situation where the consumer is affected because the individual who's selling the pest control doesn't have the knowledge to back up what they're saying. I think the reason that Mira was the first case that the department has taken action on is because the evidence that was provided was so clear. That it was between the videos and the statements and the department's investigation, it just seemed like it was clear. Plus, it was demonstrated to the department that if you're selling these contracts illegally, then you're taking revenue from the guys that are trying to do it right. And again, I am not advocating that, there should be no door-to-door sales. I think that's I think it's anytime that you can increase your revenue by some new marketing strategy, have at it. But you have to follow the law. You've got to be in compliance. And if you do door-to-door sales, several of my clients, they do door-to-door sales, but their folks have ID cards. They have the training. They have the solicitation permits. They're following the law. Yes, it costs them more money to do that, but they're successful in their door-to-door sales. Whereas if you bring in a company that, is not giving the training, is not, not W-2 employees, those things, it's hurting the industry.
Attorney Mark Ruff on the show. That was episode 261, discussing Florida's crackdown on illegal door-to-door pest control sales. We're going to move up now to episode 262 with my Pest Pro's Brett Lieberman. This is where the AI talk went into full swing back in February. And when Brett comes on the show, it's always a pleasure. And developments in artificial intelligence is always fascinating. And we got the chance to learn more about what Brett is up to. And a great example of what he is up to is an AI model that can book jobs. And despite some early hiccups, it's said to be operating great. The focus here is about an AI board of directors for your business. And if you haven't thought of this yet, you might want to give it a try.
So actually, I've got this idea. It wasn't my idea, I'll be honest. I got it from an article I read. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about somebody who kind of did something similar, but more of a sounding board. And I thought, right around that time, we'd received our monthly reports from PCO bookkeepers. And I'm like, wonder what they would say. So I started, I created this, and it was a, CEO, CFO, the chief marketing officer, I forget all the other roles, and created personas for each of them. So they could question whatever we want to do. So we might be saying, hey, we're looking to expand to a new area, or we're looking at increasing our digital ads, or whatever it might be. Here's an idea we're thinking of. What do you think about that? And they go back, they'll give me a whole scenario and usually rip me a new one on a lot of things. And it's pretty blunt. My AI has taken on its own personality a little bit. And maybe it's my personality.
Probably looks in the mirror.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So it's been pretty interesting. It's been pretty dead on. and some good. And
Oh yeah, I was floored. The whole board of directors idea was pretty cool.
yeah, I don't do it enough. I don't run. So basically, we created a GPT agent, which you could do, and you could load a lot of information about your company in there. If you do use Chat GPT or any of these, I think Donnie, you've said this before. Get the paid versions, so your information is not shared out publicly. And I don't do that one enough. Might be because it hurts my feelings too much.
Final episode of February coming up now, and with Legislative Day just a couple of weeks out, it's the perfect time to check in with NPMA to hear about the plans for D.C. We featured the COO of NPMA, Andrew Architect, and the Senior Director of Public Policy, Megan Striegel. Here we go.
Back in the mid-1990s, there was a Supreme Court case, and the definition of preemption in the Farm Bill says that states may regulate the sale and use of pesticides. So that was challenged because a state could be a political subdivision of the state was the case they made, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. So the Supreme Court essentially said, every town and every state, if they choose to, they can regulate the sale and use of pesticides, meaning that, if a technician has 10 stops a day, they might not realize what county or what city they're in, and each would have different laws of what products can and can't be applied. So NPMA worked kind of from the mid-90s till early 2000s with the American Legislative Exchange Council. And we were actually able to get laws passed in 45 out of the 50 states that, said only a state and not a political subdivision of a state may regulate it, so that if you're doing business in North Carolina, New Jersey, Florida, you can apply products the same whether you're in one of the, couple hundred counties. So what we've sort of seen over the last few years is activists' attempts to roll back pesticide preemption. It's California, Colorado, a lot of the northeastern states. So right now, the framework is really good if you don't live in Maine, Maryland, Nevada, or Hawaii. But if you're in any of the other 45 states, Minnesota is kind of a weird one because it's kind of 50% preemption. But 45 states, bulk of the work done in the U.S. is done, based on state laws. But what activists have kind of seen is, hey, we can start trying to roll these things back with, bans on rodenticides, bans on neonics, pyrethroids. So it's not so much that we're trying to get something done that isn't already practiced, but more so protect it so we don't have to fight 45 state battles. But if we could pass it at the federal level, then we never have to worry about rollbacks in the future. And I think that that's kind of the key element of, why we're working so hard and so long and trying to get it done federally.
That's the show, folks. Insiders Rewind comes up once per month. Full shows are always available at pmpindustryinsider.com, and while you're there, you can get information on peer groups. But if you are a regular on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you can help us by subscribing and following the show. And when you do that, it will help push the show to more people that are in the industry that may have questions that could be answered with Dan and Donnie on the PMP Industry Insider Podcast. I'm Brett, the editor. I'll be back in April to do this all again. Have a great month.